Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem. The bottom line of the Amud, the new Mishnah. Our Mishnah discusses a cripple with what object can he go out with on Shabbos. Our Mishnah enumerates three different examples. Says the Mishnah, Hakiteya yoitze bekav shaloi div Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yossi oiser. A kiteya is somebody who has an amputation on one of his legs. He's missing a foot, whereby the stump of his leg goes into a kav. They prepare a wooden foot, and he doesn't walk on it, so therefore it doesn't bear his weight, but he walks on crutches. Says Rabbi Meir, he can go out with this kav, with this wooden foot, because after all, it's like a malbush, it's like a shoe for such a cripple. Rabbi Yossi says no, it's prohibited to go out with because it's only there not to bear his weight, because he's not walking on it, but rather it's used to cover up that he's missing a foot, and therefore it's not considered to be a tachshit. Rabbi Yossi doesn't say that he's chayiv chatos, because it's not a typical way of carrying in the Rishus HaRabim, but rather it's also midirabbanon. The Mishnah goes on to say, V'im yeshlo beis kibul kisisin tame. If this kav, this wooden foot, has a receptacle where you're able to put in padding, things that make it soft for the stump to then put into that wooden foot, then it's going to mekabel tuma. Because in order for a kli to mekabel tuma, a kli eitz, it has to be a kli eitz that has a base kibul. And therefore, if it has a base kibul, a place where a receptacle to hold this padding of the ketitin, then indeed this is going to be a wooden foot that's going to be carrying the ketitin, the padding. Whereas the previous case, where it doesn't have padding, although his stump goes into the wooden foot enough to then hold on to it, but the wooden foot is not going to be carrying his own foot. In opposite, actually, his foot is actually going to be carrying the wooden foot. His leg is going to be carrying the wooden foot. So therefore, it's not going to be mekabel tuma. Again, the requirement of a kli kibul is not only that it has a receptacle to mekabel an object, but it will actually carry that object. And over here, that will not be true when it comes to the first case, where he just has his stump into the wooden foot. The Mishnah goes on to say another case, Samoichos sheloi tmein midras, a person who has an amputation on both feet. That person, the way he gets around is he basically goes in a kneeling position. He's on his knees, whereby he puts leather pieces that go over his knees throughout his shins, so that he can push himself onto the ground. Sometimes he even crawls. And therefore, according to everybody, this is considered to be the way of a shoe for him, a malbush, whereby the yotzin behen b'Shabbos, he can go on Shabbos. It adds over here, v'nichnosin behen ba'azara. We learn at the end of the ninth parak in Brachos, that when it comes to the Beis HaMikdash, a person is not allowed to enter the Makom Mikdash, the Makom Mikdash with a shoe on, and he has to remove his shoe. Kol sheken the Azara. Over here it says, however, since this is not going to be a malbush at the end of his feet, rather we said it's going to be on his knees and on his shins, therefore it's not going to be included in this prohibition of Mara Mikdash. He would not have to take this off when he goes into the Azara in the Beis HaMikdash. The third example is a kisei, the samoichoi shaloi tmein midras. The third case is that the person is not only amputated on both feet, but his legs, he doesn't have muscle movement in those legs, and therefore the way he gets around is he sits in a short type of chair, and he holds onto types of short crutches that are like bench-shaped crutches, and he propels himself, and then he moves to the next position until he sits down once again, whereby the legs that he has padding on are going to then indeed support his weight to some degree, because when he propels himself, the ends of his legs, the stumps, they will then touch the ground and then support him slightly, whereby he will come to a sitting position once again. So it says over here, "Akisei usmuchay shelehen tmain midras." Now, we didn't describe before, the tmain midras is specifically that which is typically supporting one's weight. That is, for example, a chair or a bench or a bed. All of these things that typically support a person's weight. If a person is a zav, then that will transfer the av hatum of a zav to the bench or the chair or the bed that he's sitting on or lying on or leaning on. Over here it says, since it is supporting his weight, in this case, thereby he will then have also tumas midras. If he's a zav, this item will also become tameh, as a tumas av. And it says over here, ve'ein yotzin b'Shabbos. However, he cannot go out with this on Shabbos, because these things are to protect his legs, but they're not considered to be a min'al, they're not considered to be a shoe or a malbush or even a tachshit. Ve'nichnasin behen ba'azara. And because these are at the end of his stumps, therefore he cannot enter them in the azara, because again, Mareh Mikdash requires that one takes off those coverings that are at the end of one's foot. The Mishnah concludes by saying, Luktamin taharin ve'ein yotzim bahen. Luktamin will be described in the Gemara, different opinions what luktamin are, but they are not mekabel tuma, because they're not a kli. And they also, however, cannot go out with those on Shabbos either. Says the Gemara, going back on the first example in our Mishnah, the Mishnah again read, Hakiteya yotze bekav sheloi div Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yossi oiser. According to our version, our Mishnah says that Rabbi Meir permits the kiteya to go out with that wooden foot, whereas Rabbi Yossi prohibits it. Ask the Gemara, Rav Nachman, Heichan tnan. How is this Mishnah taught? In other words, is this Mishnah taught the way we have it in our Mishnah? Or is it actually in the reversed order, that really it's Rabbi Yossi that permits and Rabbi Meir that prohibits it? Omar lei. So Rav Nachman answers, Rava lo yadana. I don't know. Hilchasamai, a second question. What is the halacha? Can one go out, this cripple, can he go out with the kiteh, with the wooden foot, or not? Halacha, lamaisa, what's the din? Omar lei. Again, Rav Nachman answers, lo yadana, I don't know. Itmar, so the Gemara now brings a statement from the Amoraim. Omar Shmuel. Shmuel said, Ein hakiteya. A kiteya cannot go out, meaning to say, it's written like this: Ein hakiteya yotze bekav sheloi div Rabbi Meir. It's Rabbi Meir that says a kiteya cannot go out with his wooden foot, whereas Rabbi Yossi permits it. Not like the way we have it in our Mishnah. Omar Rav Yosef. Sorry. V'chein Omar Rav Huna ein hakiteya. Rav Huna says also like Shmuel in the version that's saying ein hakiteya yotze bekav sheloi div Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Yossi says it's permitted. So we have Rav Shmuel, we have Rav Huna, and now the Gemara adds another Amora. Omar Rav Yosef hoyil ve'Omar Shmuel ein hakiteya ve'Omar Rav Huna ein hakiteya ananami nisni ein hakiteya. So now Rav Yosef says, since Shmuel and Rav Huna say that the version is Ein HaKiteya Yotze B'Kav Shelo according to Rabbi Meir, and as Rabbi Yossi permits it, that's the version as well. So we have three Amoraim, Shmuel, Rav Huna, and Rav Yosef, that say that is the way the Mishnah is taught. Ask the Gemara, Maskif Rove Bar Shiro. Lo shmiya lehu hode masni le Rav Chanan bar Rove lechia bar Rav kamei de Rav b'kituno derei Rav. Did you not hear what was said in the room in front of Rav, in the house of Rav, in front of Rav? Did you not hear what was said? It was taught the following: Ein hakiteya yotze bekav sheloi di Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi matir. That's the way that all three of these Amoraim stated. Shmuel, Rav Huna, and Rav Yosef in this version. On that, however, when it's stated before Rav, umachve le Rav ipuch, and Rav indicated that it's the opposite, that indeed it's Rabbi Meir that permits and Rabbi Yosi that is Oyser, the way we have it in our Mishnayos. Rav Nachem bar Yisrael v'simonach samich samich, and the siman to remember the correct version is samich samich. Rabbi Yosi with a samich, Oyser with a samich. Says the Gemara, v'af Shmuel hadar bei, and even Shmuel, after he heard this, he also was choizer boy. This nan, for it says in the Mishnah the following: Cholza b'sandal she'eino sheloi, in regards to a yavam who is to marry his deceased brother's wife, if he chooses not to do yibum but rather chalitza. So it says in the Mishnah, what can he do chalitza with? Cholza b'sandal she'eino sheloi. He can do chalitza, can take off the shoe from the right foot, even if it's not going to be his shoe. Besandal shel eitz, it could be even a sandal of wood. Or shel small biyamin, or if it was a left sandal on the right foot, so long as it's taken off from the right foot. Chalitza kesheira, the Mishnah says it's a good chalitza. V'amrinon man tana, and we say, who is the tana of this Mishnah that says chalitza is good with a wooden shoe? Omar Shmuel, Rabbi Meir, it's Rabbi Meir. This nan hakiteya yoytze bekav sheloi div Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yosi, so clearly Shmuel holds that the version is like we have it in our Mishnayos, that it's Rabbi Meir that permits the kiteya to go out with his wooden foot, whereas Rabbi Yosi is oiser. Rav Huna hodarbe, and Rav Huna also was choizer boy. This Hanya, Rav Huna also went back to saying it's like our version. As it says in the following brayso, sandal shel saidin tamei midras. A sandal that goes on the foot of the one who sells plaster is tamei midras. Now, a saidin, when he sells the plaster, there was a concern that his regular leather shoes become burnt by the sid, so therefore he would wear wooden shoes over those leather shoes, or in place of the leather shoes. So it says he would be tamei midras, because after all they're supporting his weight, and therefore if he was a zav, these shoes would also, even though they're made out of wood, would also become tamei midras and avatuma. V'isha choletzes boy, and a woman can be choletzes with such a shoe, a wooden shoe. V'yotzim boy b'Shabbos, and he can go out with on Shabbos because it's considered to be a minal, a malbush. Di Rabbi Akiva says this Mishnah. V'loy hodu loy, but the Chachamim did not agree with Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara says v'hatanya hodu loy, but a Brisa says that they did agree with Rabbi Akiva. And says Rav Huna, Omar Rav Huna, what is the way to explain these two opposing statements? Man hoidu loy Rabbi Meir, or man lo hoidu Rabbi Yosi. The one statement that says that they agreed to Rabbi Akiva, that is Rabbi Meir. And the ones that say they're cholek on Rabbi Akiva, that's Rabbi Yosi. In other words, he holds again like our present version, that Rabbi Meir permits a shoe that is a wooden shoe to be gone out with on Shabbos because it's considered to be a minal. Omar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef said there's another Tana that argues on Rabbi Akiva as follows: Man lo hoduloi, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. This nan, it says in the Mishnah. Now there's a difference in the gears over here. It says the following: Machzeles shel kanim v'shefoferes shel kanim. A mat that is made out of straw, or a tube-like receptacle, kli, that is made out of straw. Rabbi Akiva metame. Rabbi Akiva says it's tame. First of all, in regards to the machzeles, the mat, since it's used to put one's weight on, therefore if the person is a zav, he'll metame that as a midras. And in regards to the shvofer shel kash, that is going to be metame through touching, through contact with it. If he's a zav, he'll metame it that way. And therefore, according to Rabbi Akiva, these things, kash is like eitz, has a din of eitz, and therefore is makabel tuma. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri metar. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, no, these things are not the typical ways of making the machzeles and the shoferes. Those are things are not only made with kash, but rather with kanim, and they're not mekabel tuma because he holds that the straw is not the din of an eitz, and therefore similarly as before when it comes to the shoe that Rabbi Akiva was speaking about, who says the eitz is mekabel tuma, he over here holds that no. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuni says that eitz is not mekabel tuma. So therefore, he's choylek on Rabbi Akiva as well. Omar Ma, the Gemara brings back the statement we had before, sandal shel saidin tamei midras. The one who sells plaster, so he will make, if he's a zov, the shoe that he's wearing, which is made out of eitz, made out of wood, to mitame that as a avatuma, if he's a zov, because he puts his weight in it. Ask the Gemara, halav lahilucha avde, but these type of shoes are not made for walking, they're just to protect his foot or his leather shoes from burning. Omar Ravacha bar Rav Ula shekain hasayid mitayel boy ad shemagia lebeso. Since somebody who sells plaster wears these shoes until he goes home after the workplace, therefore it's considered to be something that he does use to put his weight in, and therefore it is makabel tuma. The Gemara now quotes the next part of the Mishnah, V'im yesh lo beis kibul kesisin tamei. This is going on the first case where the cripple has a wooden foot that he puts the stump of his leg into. So the Mishnah says that if that wooden foot has a beis kibul for padding, so it'll be tamei. So what type of tamei are we talking about? It's a discussion in our Gemara. Omar Abaye. Abaye says tamei tumas meis ve'ein tamei midras. It's tamei with contact, but not tamei as a midras. In other words, the tumas meis that we're referring to is not specifically tumas meis. It just means tumas meis in contrast to tumas midras. Since tumas midras makes it so that the zov transfers his avatuma to the object that he's putting his weight on. So therefore, in this case, according to Abaye, it's only going to then be a tumas meis with contactual type of tuma, but not something that actually will be a tuma of tumas midras, because normally tumas meis transfers its same degree of tuma. The avi avas hatuma of a meis will transfer an avatuma to the thing that it's being metame. So over here, Abai uses the example of a tumas meis, but it's referring to any contactual type of tuma. Rava argues, af tamei midras. Over here, it's also including a tamei midras, that the tamei midras will also be over here in the one who's wearing this wooden foot. Omar Rava, where do I know mina amina law to say that indeed he's also going to make, if he's a zov, the wooden foot into a avatuma as a tumas midras? This not. It says agola shel koton tamei midras. We find that when a child plays with his carriage, he goes into the carriage, he pushes it, whatever it is, he occasionally is now putting his weight into the carriage, and still it's enough to make it tumas midras. So too over here, when this cripple then puts his weight sometimes on this wooden foot, it's enough to make it tumas midras. Abaye argues, Hasam samich ilave, hachala samich ilave. Over there, in the agala, in the carriage, the child puts his entire weight in. He actually sits in the carriage. Whereas over here, he's not putting his whole weight in it. He's barely putting some weight into this wooden foot. Omar Abaye, because most of the weight is going on the crutches. Omar Abaye, mina mina law. Where do I know to say that it's indeed only a contactual type of tumah, but not tumas midras? The Tanya, for it says in the following brisa, makil shel zekenim tor mikulam. If an elderly person has a cane, it doesn't become tamei whatsoever. So you see, even though he occasionally puts his weight on it, nonetheless, it's not tumas midras. V'rava hasam letirutze sugya avida. Rava says that's different because over there, in the case of the cane, there he's using it to straighten out his steps, and therefore it's not putting his weight on, and that's why over there it's not mekabel tuma. Hachav over here, lismach ilave Yehuda avide v'samich alei. But over here, he does put his weight into the wooden foot occasionally, enough to make it tumas midras. The Gemara now quotes the latter part of the Mishnah, meaning the third case of the Mishnah that says, Kisei v'salmochos Sheloit mein midras. In the case where the cripple has two amputations on both feet, and he sits in a small, low chair, the Gemara comments, Tana kamed Rabbi Yochanan. This was taught in a Bryce and Rabbi Yochanan, the following, Nichnosin bohen la'azara, that indeed he can enter with them into the azara, meaning with the padding that he has that's covering, the leather covering over his stumps, right? Those he doesn't have to take off when he goes to the azara in the Beis Hamikdash. Omar lei, Rabbi Yochanan's response was, Ani shoyne isha choletzes boy, vat amis nichnosin. I say that a woman can even be used as to do chalitza with such a covering. And you're telling me that indeed he can enter the Beis Hamikdash with this in the Azara. Therefore, Tani, it's taught you have to change the understanding of the Brisa. Means different. Like our Mishnah says, you cannot enter with these coverings in the Azar because since they're covering at the end of his stumps, therefore it's considered to be a minal in the sense that he has to take them off for Mareh Mikdash. The last part of the Mishnah said luktamin tahara, that these luktamin are not mekabel tuma, and you could also not go out into the Rishus HaRabim with them on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, what are these luktamin? My luktamin. Rabbi Abahu, there's three different understandings. Rabbi Abahu says, chamar de achpa. This is a clown's type of makeshift donkey. In other words, a fake donkey that he suspends from his shoulders and appears to then ride on. He doesn't put his weight on it, but he appears to be riding on it. This is what we're talking about, luktamin. So it does not mikabel tumah because it's not a kli, and you also cannot go out with it, right? It's not mikabel tumah, it's not a kli, and he doesn't put his weight on it, right, for a midras. And he doesn't go out with it on Shabbos because, after all, it is something that's not considered to be a malbush or a tachshit. Rava bar Papa really should be either Rami bar Papa or Rafram bar Papa, one of the 10 sons of Rav Papa. Rava bar Papa is not one of the 10 sons. Omar Kashire, he says it's that type of stilts when there is a lot of cement or mud that a person needs to walk over a deep area with, so he uses these stilts. So here, this is Pshute Kli 8, which is not Mekabel Tuma. And also you cannot go out with on Shabbos because again, it's not a malbush or a tachshit. Rava bar Rav Huna Omar Frimi. Rav Huna says this is referring to a mask that is used to scare somebody else with. And again, this is not a kli, so it's not Mekabel Tuma. And also, it's something that's not considered to be a true malbush or a tachshit, and therefore one cannot go out with it on Shabbos.